Greetings. This is General CJG here. After weeks, yes, we're finally back and with a brand new State of Star Wars podcast. This time we're, I guess you could say, continuing on Drew Karpyshyn's works in Star Wars, because the last podcast was about the Revan book, but now we're going back to his more popular Star Wars work, excluding the KOTOR games, which is the Darth Bane Trilogy, starting right now with Darth Bane Path of Destruction. Yep, a 2006 EU book. And joining me here, I got...
This is the Spider-Man Maniac, back again.
And?
Captain Henson, Path of Destruction. That's a fitting title for what this book did to continuity.
Well, I guess there is that. So yeah. So without further ado, I say let's go with a very, very quick summary on our introduction to this book. So who wants to go first?
Okay, I'll go first. Now, originally, when I first read this book, I didn't really pay attention to the details of Jedi vs. Sith, so I thought it was an enjoyable book to read. Now, after multiple times of rereading Jedi vs. Sith and Bane of the Sith, and getting to know more about the EU lore, I started to question a lot of decisions about this book, which I will elaborate as the podcast goes on. Next.
Okay, Henson, your turn.
So, my introduction to this book. So, before getting into the EU, I knew this book existed because, in terms of books you'd get recommended, this, along with the next two, I heard all the time. And obviously, as I'm trying to get every piece of EU fiction, definitely on my list. But before reading this book, if you guys remember, I read Jedi vs. Sith for my very first State of Star Wars podcast. And I don't remember if any of you had said that Path of Destruction contradicted the comic or not. So I don't know if I was prepared for that, but when I eventually did read Path of Destruction, and along with the other two, I noticed that there were a lot of contradictions, so much so that nothing seemed to fit. And also the Revan worship, but we'll get into that later.
Oh, yeah.
So I came out of the book thinking it was well written, but having serious fucking problems that led to me not enjoying it as much as I could have.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay, as for mine, well, it's a similar story to Dolan's. I actually had read the book first before even reading Jedi vs. Sith or Bane of the Sith, and yeah, I did really enjoy it. At first, I found interesting all the references and callbacks to Knights of the Old Republic 1, but that was before I played Knights of the Old Republic 2, or even read the Revan book, or the other two sources regarding Bane. So now that I've read all of that, well, let's just say that definitely now I know how much this book, let's just say, does not really fit that well, at least if you are trying to have both Jedi vs. Sith and the Path of Destruction book simultaneously. It's like, clearly one of the two is trying to do one interpretation of a specific event, and the other is trying to do that too, but they don't fit well, and that is definitely a problem. So it definitely doesn't help that Drew Karpyshyn has, let's just say, this is probably the beginning of his retconning path in Star Wars lore. If I do say so myself, maybe you could argue started a bit in KOTOR once. He was one of the lead writers there, but I'd say no. I think this definitely is the beginning for that, which will ultimately, of course, culminate in the Revan book, as we've seen before. So, yep. So that's my brief thoughts on this book right now, and I definitely want to get into detail with it. So,
before we move on, I do want to say, if anyone is interested in hearing my initial thoughts on Path of Destruction along with the trilogy and Jedi vs. Sith, go check out the Captain Henson channel. I go into way more detail on what my thoughts were, because this is my second reading of the book, so things have changed since then. Things I've noticed. Things that have made me angrier.
Oh, By the way, we did do a Jedi vs. Sith review on here. So if you think like you have some kind of a deja vu, thinking, did I hear this section? Or someone might be asking, oh, didn't you guys already review this? That's probably because there are overlapping sections, so yeah.
There's that indeed. So yeah. Okay, but before we get into the book itself, so Henson, what do you think we should do first before we get into the book?
Well, I think before we get into the book that retconned a lot, first thing we should do is briefly summarize what Bane's story was before the release of Path of Destruction, because, as I said, this book changed things. Things now don't line up as they should have. So I will hand it over to the people more familiar with the details than me.
According to what I know, is this. Bane used to be a member of the Brother of Darkness, and he used to be a student of Cordis. Now, Bane didn't entirely finish his training under Cordis, but managed to somehow become a Sith Lord. And he went on to call himself Darth Bane. He had some sort of romantic relationship with Githany, I guess. And while he was a Sith Lord, he had a lot of conflicts with Khan and other Brotherhood due to certain ideological differences. While all this thing was going on, Khan got tired of Bane constantly being in his way, ordered Githany to poison him, and that's how we continue on with Jedi vs. Sith.
Okay.
Now, don't expect me to explain the plot of Jedi vs. Sith, because I'm not gonna do that here.
Yeah, we don't need to do that. But there is one thing that we should mention in regards to Jedi vs. Sith. The events depicting Bane in that comic, they do vary heavily in this book. Like, they don't definitely align.
Oh, I did forget this. Bane did create his Rule of Two by getting inspired by Exar Kun and Uli Keldroma.
Keep that in mind for later. Okay. That's a real contentious point for us.
Yes, indeed. So, yep. So without further ado, so basic summary, Bane back then had a different master, had conflicting ideologies, but the way it was executed and how the Brotherhood of Darkness was on their path to their downfall and how Bane was acting at that time definitely vary between the comic and the book. So that's just how we'll leave it here, and we'll get into a bit more detail when we dive into the book itself. So without further ado, okay, let's begin with part 1. So part 1 is basically Darth Bane's early life as Deso in Apatros. That's the entirety of part 1, as well as his time in the Gloomwalkers before he started training in the Korriban Sith Academy. So basically, it starts with Deso working on Apatros, mining Cortosis, and he has several issues and disputes with his fellow miners. Well, more like colleagues that don't like him, and he even manages to get one into a back thing of sorts, injured. So that happens. Then Deso pretty much has a gambling match in the cantina of Apatros. He manages to win it by using let's just say a small glimpse of the Force, because he is Force sensitive, and he was using the Force, at least indirectly, using it to pretty much predict what type of cards would be releasing when he was playing the Basak game in the cantina. He won against the Republic Ensign. That didn't go well. The Republic Ensign and 2 of his colleagues wanted to kill him. They ended up being dead. So Deso had to escape from the entire planet because the Republic was going to pretty much tell the Apatros government, yeah, we want the head of that guy. So yeah, so Deso escaped with the help of the cantina's owner, Groshik, and he went on his way to join the Sith. as one of the new Sith troopers. And several months passed, and Deso pretty much went from soldier to being a sergeant in charge of the Gloomwalkers, and under the leadership of Lieutenant Ulabor, which he was kind of a coward and a prick, not really somebody that actually knew what the hell he was doing. And there's this one moment in which, well, this one battle in which basically Ulabor tasks the Gloomwalkers to pretty much attack an outpost on broad daylight, which that did not suit well whatsoever. The Gloomwalkers, they wanted to attack in the night when basically they could better strike at the outpost so that they would not be seen, especially by the turrets and gunships guarding the place. So, and Deso did not like it. He literally made a mutiny, punched Ulabor in the face, knocking him out cold, and he proceeded to pretty much lead the Gloomwalkers to take down the outpost so that the main Sith fleet could basically strike the main Republic army in Fasira, the planet. So yeah, let's just say that Deso managed to indirectly use the Force to make some miraculous sniper kills in very few seconds, even with being blinded by the flash grenade. And after that, and the rest of the Gloomwalkers pretty much managed to take the outpost. Let's just say that the mission was a success, but Ulabor was mad, and he pretty much told some Sith troopers to pretty much take Deso to Korriban to pretty much be taken to the feet of the Brotherhood of Darkness for trial. To Deso's surprise, no, Deso was not going to die. Instead, the Brotherhood of Darkness took him under their wing and pretty much made him into a Sith apprentice. And this would also be the first time in which Deso rejected his old name, and now he's called Bane. And that's the end of part 1. So, guys, what do you think of this part?
Okay, there's something really noticeable. Like, Bane actually says this. I couldn't believe my eyes when I read this. When Karpyshyn asked Bane, like, Deso, what will be your new Sith name? Something like that. Bane says, I am Bane. Bane of the Sith. Like, is Drew Karpyshyn mocking us? What is this? Bane of the Sith? Get it? Guys, Bane of the Sith?
What do you think of that, Henson?
Well, okay, like, I can understand what he was going for. You know, it'd be like, oh, I am this of the this. Like, I don't know, like Palpatine saying, I am Palpatine of House Palpatine, you know, something like that. He is Bane of the Sith. He is from this organization, but I'm sure there was a wink wink, nudge nudge, do you get it thing going on there. I don't know, it didn't really bother me, but what more so a pet peeve, I don't like the fact that we don't find out his last name, right?
No,
I think, does he have one?
Doesn't seem.
I don't think it's ever said.
No, not even his father had one.
Here's the thing with franchises like Star Wars, not everybody does have a family name.
Yeah, that's...
In this case, I feel like he should, but no, that's more so a pet peeve I have. I just like knowing characters' full names. But in terms of overall, I did like this first part. It's the least problematic part in the entire fucking novel.
Yeah.
You know, finding out his backstory was interesting. The Sabacc game was really interesting. If you ever wanted to know how Sabacc worked as a game, you can read this fucking book, because they go through a ton of the rules for it.
Yeah.
But, you know, that I think was a good display of Bane's thought process. He's a smart dude, being able to suss out, you know, how to best manipulate these Republic soldiers. And it was also great to see that, yeah, people have genuine reasons to not like the Jedi and the Republic.
That was really interesting because, like, the Republic does not seem to have a hint that, like, the Outer Rim does not like them. Like, these soldiers are so obnoxious, like, they say that, you know, without us, like, you will all be slaves and you get at least paid. And Ezzo says, like, no, like, you pay the company the credits and we get paid shit.
Yep.
But we do get this interesting tidbit, and this is the start of something I'm not particularly fond of in this book. It is this in this part where we first get Revan mentioned.
Oh yeah.
In regards to the Republic outlawing any Sith-related shit, which does not make a lick of sense. Like, why, like, we've had Sith Lords and Sith shit happening years before Revan came along, and you mean to tell me it was Revan that was the final push needed?
Let's have some examples. Let's see. Oh, what about Ajunta Paul, your own creation, through Karpyshyn? Or let's see, Nagasado? Ludo Crash? No, let's go and have some early examples. Exarchun, Uli Kildroma? Why is Revan the reason the Sith is illegal? And that's weird.
Like, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but what Revan did was, like, nowhere near in comparison to the shit those other Sith Lords did. Am I wrong? And so in a sense, this is before we got to the SWTOR stuff.
Oh yeah,
That stuff doesn't even exist yet. It's just the first two KOTOR games, and even then, KOTOR 2 never brought up in this story once.
Never.
So it's really just the first game that matters here.
I mean, no, that's not my issue with it. My issue is the mere fact that it called itself a novel of the Old Republic in the first place.
I mean, that's minor grievance. No, the main issue here is that, yes, Henson said, it's only KOTOR 1. The previous Sith Lords, or even the future Sith Lords after Revan and Malak, like, they don't really get more, like, mentions or references, and very vague ones, at least in the case of Exarchun, but all the others...
Yeah, we'll get into that when it's more appropriate, but for now, this just does not make any sense. There is no reason that Revan and Malak are the reason that the Sith shit was outlawed. That should have already been... I cannot believe for a single second Sith shit wasn't already outlawed before Revan and Malak came along.
Yeah, especially since in KOTOR 1, it was already outlawed romances because what happened with Uli Kaldroma, if you remember, because he fell for Limaketo and that happened. So there already was some forbidden stuff. So why is it that after Revan and Malak? Like, what?
And another thing I noticed is, like, when Esso mentions to the Republic ensign, like, I thought Revan saved the Republic. And the officer says Revan's story is complicated. And I'm just wondering, like, nothing's complicated about Revan's history. He was a Dark Lord, and then the Jedi Order captured him, did something with his mind, and then he turned to the light side, saved the galaxy, destroyed the Starforge. No, that's not complicated.
Funny enough, I was thinking the exact same thing when reading it. At least, at the time this was written, it wasn't complicated. Then when you add in all the SWTOR stuff,
yeah,
then you really start to question, like, Jesus Christ, but just looking, I think that was in reference to the fact that KOTOR was choice-based.
Actually, that can't be it because there were already canonical decisions.
Well, yeah, I know we had canonical decisions, but I think that was just a reference to the fact that the game was player choice, so somebody's playthrough would be different from another's.
I myself just chalked it off to the Republic soldier just not wanting to say anything more to Bane. That's all. That's how I chalked it off when reading that bit.
Well, I mean, there has to be a reason why Karpyshyn wrote that line.
There could be.
And I think it has to do with the fact that it was just a reference to how KOTOR was as a game with its RPG mechanics. Like, it's just a cheeky nod, not actually saying that we don't know for certain.
There are good parts, as we previously mentioned about the Republic and Bane explaining why, we don't like the Republic, and what was it? It's been working in the mines for all these years, and the Jedi and the Republic didn't came to help him and his injustice, despite the fact that, they preach about equality and and was it Justice?
Mm.
In the Outer Rim, the strongest person survives, which his views are consistent with the Sith or something, right?
Yeah.
You can say that, yeah.
Well, something I also like is his relationship with the bartender. What was his name?
Broshik.
Yeah, him. Yeah, it was a nice little relationship they had. Interesting to see Bane at a point in his life where he actually had someone he genuinely cared about. And that's what this whole part is all about. Seeing Bane before, getting into the Sith. And we do see. Oh, wait, yeah, we also have the Gloomwalkers in this part. And getting to see him on the front lines, being with the squad, as someone who really likes the military side of Star Wars, it's always nice to see just what those are like without, Jedi or Sith on the battlefield. Yeah, it was nice to have him with a squad. They have a relationship, they trust each other, they, see things through to the end. So then when Bane has to leave, it hits you. I mean, it doesn't hit you that hard because you barely spent any time with these characters, so you don't really care, but still,
One of
would have
them
been nice to
does
see
that.
more of it. Especially with, we get told that some of the battles they were on, like, oh, they survived 3 days on Kashyyyk just on their own. They got their asses kicked by Trandoshans.
Yeah.
Oh, another one of the soldiers called Lucia. I think that's other book information. She does return, so there's that. But
And what?
Dynasty of Evil.
Oh, yeah.
I do not remember that.
Shit.
Another important thing that's listed is like the members of Gloomwalkers were thinking inside like Lieutenant Ulivor will have a quote-unquote unfortunate accident. I wonder what that's supposed to mean. That's
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
No idea on that one. So, there is that. So, yeah. Anything else you guys want to mention on part 1?
Yeah, part 1 has the least amount of problems and actually explores Bane's life and the Outer Rim's relationship with the Republic, so that's good, I guess.
It is good, yeah.
Probably
Listen.
say it's my favorite part of the novel just on the grounds of it not causing problems.
Let's say it's the least offensive part.
It also,
Not to mention, one of the things I like most in sci-fi stories is an exploration of the societies and how they work within this universe. And I get that in this part and not really in the next 2 parts. We get a lot of exploration on the nature of the dark side, kind of.
Wait,
Which,
didn't
yeah, I like the Force stuff, but I find learning about the galaxy, its cultures, governments far more interesting.
Wait, by the way, didn't the prologue show Khan and the brother regaining Korriban?
oh, yeah. It did show that very briefly. So, there is that. So, yeah. Anything else to mention on part 1?
No.
No.
Okay. Then we go to the next part. So now Bane is finally starting in the Korriban Sith Academy. So he's pretty much training under the Sith Masters, and also studying in the library archives. So that definitely is happening, and his power definitely is getting stronger and stronger. So for several months, then he challenges a Mucker student named Fohar in the duel ring. And so, yep, they find the lightsaber duel, and Bane loses the lightsaber duel, and Fohar is like taunting him a lot, which makes Bane get increasingly angry to the point in which he unleashes the full power of the dark side on Fohar and literally like crushes the shit out of him and kills him. Which, yeah, that definitely took everyone off guard. And so, yeah, while the victory was definitely felt good for Bane, let's just say that everybody else was not really too keen on, because the Brotherhood of Darkness does not like it that the students kill each other. Yeah, I know. That's definitely not how the Sith go, but yeah. The reason why is because they pretty much, according to how Cortis and Kasim say it, they pretty much value every single student in the Korban Sith Academy because each one of them has the potential to becoming a Sith Lord, a Dark Lord of the Sith, to my eye. So, which are basically the strongest Force wielders that the Brotherhood of Darkness has in store for when battling the Jedi. So that's pretty much why. However, that's not necessarily something that Bane agrees with it entirely because how he views the dark side, or at least has his understanding of it, is that the strong will always persist while the weak will pretty much perish. So that's how it is, and definitely causes some bit of conflicts with how the Brotherhood of Darkness think. So yeah, definitely causes troubles. So ultimately, this, while Bane did get some explanations from Cortis and stuff, let's just say this victory made Bane somehow get weakened. Basically, he made like a mental barrier of sorts that was prohibiting him from pretty much obtaining the full power of the dark side, which made his victories and his teachings sloppier and more like falling. So that definitely was not going well. And Bane at one point pretty much like wanted to fully test how low he went. So he literally challenged the best student in the academy, a Sabrak named Serac. So they fought, and Sabrak pretty much beat Bane easily, even humiliating him. And Bane was literally forced to be in a back tank for several days, which, yeah, that was humiliating. So yeah, after that, Bane was pretty much shunned by the other Sith. Not even the Masters wanted anything to do with him. So he was just reading the archives to find some more info. So yeah, it wasn't until a certain new Sith student arrived, which yeah, it's Gittany herself, who pretty much started teaching Bane how some Force techniques that she had learned from her previous Jedi Masters and also from the Brotherhood of Darkness. So yeah, he was starting to train under her, and also he was secretly training under Kasim after some persuasion from him. So, yeah, because apparently Cortis had pretty much told all the masters, oh yeah, don't teach Bane anything. So Bane had to secretly train with Kasim. So yeah, after training with both together, his power pretty much ended up becoming more and more stronger, lifting those mental barriers he had that were prohibiting him from getting his full power. And so yeah, he finally managed to challenge Serac again to a duel, managed to best him pretty easily. And there was this one point that Bane hesitated in killing him, but which definitely disappointed Gittany, and yeah, that definitely didn't go well that much. So there's that, and then, well, Gittany and Bane have this discussion, a disagreement, doesn't go that well, so there's that. And then in one night, Kasim gives Bane a curved-hilt lightsaber because of his victory against Serac. So he gives him that gift, as well as some lesson on a certain topic regarding a certain word that is for Sith Lord titles, which we'll get to in a bit. So, yep, there's that. Then Cortis summons Bane, who apparently is like literally forcing Bane to not train under Gittany anymore, and also not train under Kasim, I believe. And basically that he forced Bane to go to the Valley of the Dark Lords to find for answers on the dead Sith Lords. Bane searched, found jack shit, nothing. So only just random Tukata creatures and stuff, but nothing. And so Bane returned, and he pretty much was pissed at the realization that the Brotherhood of Darkness, because of them being united, equals instead of just one Dark Lord, the Sith, governing them all, or at least two. It's more the dark side has been weakened, and Korriban is no longer what it used to be in terms of a beacon of the dark side. So that pisses off Bane, and he literally gets so pissed that he... Oh, wait. Well, before that happens, there's also this one point in which Serac and the other two Sabraks that were leading him were pretty much trying to kill Bane. But Bane and Gittany managed to kill them. And Bane was pretty pissed with Cortis because he assumed that Cortis sent them. And, well, let's just say that in there, Bane fully revealed publicly that, yeah, he's now Darth Bane, and he sets out and he leaves the academy with Corsa's personal starship, the Battlescene, in search of a specific planet in the unknown regions, which we'll get to in a bit which one it is. And that's the end of part 2. So yeah, what do you guys think of it?
Another one thing that is noticeable is like Sirac is an obvious Darth Maul wannabe. Like double-bladed lightsaber Zabrak.
Iridonian Zabrak even, which Darth Maul originally was.
Iridonian.
Yeah.
Oh wait, that's remember?
Yeah.
The good old days.
Yeah. So
here's where we get to an interesting part of this book. So Bane goes to the archives because that's really the only place he can go to learn anything of value. And this story is all about how this character created the rule of 2, unless you read Jedi vs. Sith, but we'll fucking get to that. So he learns about past Sith Lords. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with the Old Republic era, by this point, we've gotten one or two Sith Lords, maybe a bit more. A lot of them are well established. They have tons of, mostly comics, detailing their exploits. You know, Exar Kun, Naga Sadow, etc., etc. There's a reason I pointed those two out specifically. So, when Bane is going through the archives, the only 2 Sith Lords worth noting are Naga Sadow and Exar Kun. Naga Sadow is just a hand wave. Oh, this guy did Sith alchemy, so I guess some of his teachings are good, I guess. And Exar Kun just gets his name dropped. Like, nothing about any of the shit he did, absolutely fuck all. And keep in mind what we said earlier about who Bane's original inspiration for the Rule of 2 was from. And that's weird. But the one Sith Lord he can never shut the fuck up about, that he simps for every chance he gets, is Darth Revan. Because apparently, Darth Revan was the greatest Sith Lord of all time. No one before him even compared to his greatness.
Oh boy.
He was the wisest of all the fucking Sith. He was the last, and this is like an actual quote, it was something along the lines of, he was the last great Sith Lord, or something to that effect.
Oh boy. Okay.
And it gets so fucking obnoxious. Because, like, Revan, yes, Revan is an important character in the Star Wars universe, but he was never this important.
Or the only one.
You cannot convince me that Bane only got this much value out of this one guy and no other Sith Lord. I call bullshit on that.
I think in the past I mentioned about certain writers considering their creations to be way important than there actually is and becoming overprotective. Examples are such as Timothy Zahn with regards to Mara Jade and trying to put horrendous importance on her character despite some questionable writing, and Thrawn and later in Disney Star Wars. This is exactly what Drew Karpyshyn is doing. Drew Karpyshyn knows that by the point of Path of Destruction in 2006, Knights of the Old Republic has reached a status to become the great, quote-unquote, greatest Star Wars game of all time. Drew Karpyshyn knows this, and he has to put a great emphasis on his character. Now, this is a problem I really hate when writers put their personal opinions and influence in-universe wise, because it's distracting.
Yeah, it is distracting.
There's also this point, and I brought this up in my original review. It's kind of, I usually don't say this, but I think it's appropriate here. It's kind of gross that Karpyshyn is having Bane, who was created by George Lucas, simping for Revan, who's basically Karpyshyn's own character.
Yeah.
Like, that is beyond self-indulgent, I think. Even if it wasn't his intention, it is still there.
Yeah, I wouldn't have much of a problem with it if at least, if at the very least, Karpyshyn had made, Bane like at least be like, oh, I read this from Darth Revan and Exar Kun. Like if he had said at least both of them together and maybe a few of the other Sith Lords, it wouldn't be much of a problem. Like at least sharing the spotlight of Bane learning this info with the other Sith Lords. But the fact that it's only Darth Revan and Malak, yeah, you can tell that Karpyshyn is like obviously stroking his own ego from Coder 1. It's like obvious.
And one of my big issues with this is that this story is meant to be how he created the world of 2, and yet we don't get him really analyzing any other Sith Lord. Like I said, Naga Sadow and Exar Kun are the only other Sith Lords that are mentioned, and barely. Exar Kun only gets name dropped.
I think Darth Ruin is indirectly mentioned or something in the book.
Supposedly, the book mentioned a Dark Lord that exploded a sun, but I actually don't know which is that one.
But yeah, point is, in terms of like their teachings, what they did, Revan and Malak to a lesser extent, but it's mostly Revan, is the only one that gets at all analyzed. And again, self-indulgent as all hell, but there's also the fact that, again, originally, it was in one of the guides, right, that said that he was originally inspired to create the rule of 2 from Exar Kun and
Bullet Drama.
Yeah.
It's
New Essential Guide to Characters, 2002.
Yeah, that's the one.
So we have this really weird case, and we'll get more into this when we get to part 3. This book is trying to overwrite what was already established. And the weird thing is, there's no need to do that. Like, as far as I can tell, none of the stuff we got with Bane before Path of Destruction contradicted each other. So, to outright contradict this is, one, gross, because, again, there's no fucking reason to do this. As someone who adores continuity, retconning like this, that just has no reason to be there, pisses me off. Like, look at the Plagueis novel as an example. That book does a far better job at not only exploring the nature of the dark side, but also touching upon these past Sith Lords.
A lot of them.
Yes. And of course, I mean, it's James Luceno. I mean, that guy is amazing when it comes to giving a shit about continuity. Karpyshyn, on the other hand, I mean, he knows these other sources exist, he would have to, but he just ignores it, I guess for the sake of my story. Story is more important than continuity.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, if you're writing in a pre-established universe that already has a continuity should come first. And you know what? If you cannot write a good story that fits in that continuity, then don't even write it at all. Write it as fan fiction, write it as an out-of-universe story, don't even try to fit it in here.
Yep.
Speaking of Knights of the Old Republic, the thing that bothers me a lot about this is like, this is trying to act like a pseudo-sequel to Knights of the Old Republic. Now, guess the thing that really bothers me, I'm saying that a lot, is Knights of the Old Republic, according to the New Essential chronology, set in the year 3956, and Path of Destruction is set between the years 10,006 BBY and 10,000 BBY. Now, there's like at least 2,900 and something years between those events, but why are you acting like something that happened almost 3,000 years ago, Revan, Malak, Starforge, blah blah blah, as this important thing, like happened like a couple years ago? I mean, what about the other things that happened between those years, huh?
You see, this is a case of SWTOR not existing at this point is a real problem because so much happens in that should be brought up here, but isn't.
You know what?
Actually, that's not the only problem, because you guys know what the new Sith is, right?
You mean the True Sith Empire from SWTOR, or which?
No, I'm talking about the recent Sith. Now, by the time of Bane's time, in 2000 BBY, a Sith Lord called Darth Ruin has created the new Sith. And Khan was the one who reunited the various Sith factions. Now, the problem I'm stating here is like there's like a couple of Sith lords like that were running around for like 900 years fighting each other, fighting against the Republic, and this book doesn't bother to mention any of them.
If you ask me, one thing that Henson told me privately days ago is that the book was not really obligated to mention Knights of the Old Republic 1, but if it was going to do it, at the very least should mention all the other sources involving the Sith Lords, especially KOTOR 2, as if it's mentioning the first game, might as well mention the second one. But no, only KOTOR 1 is here.
We get it, Drew. We know how great the game you and your people made. Okay, we admit that it's a good game and all, but stop bringing it up constantly, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because, every other, I'll just say, in, like, every chapter, it's, oh, yeah, Revan and Malik did this. Oh, the Rakata were a thing. The Starforge was a thing. And it's like, I hope people who read this novel really loved KOTOR because
they did.
They would get a kick out of reading this, especially if you're a Revan fanboy who can't shut up about how awesome he is and how KOTOR 2 made him like the most complex character in the entire fucking galaxy behind Kreia.
Oh god.
It's like, you know what? I don't care about Revan as a character. I'd go as far as to say I think he's a bit overrated. So, to have this constant Revan worship, especially with what we know becomes of Revan as a character by the time we get to the SWTOR era of content, this is a sign of things to come, and I am not for it.
To be fair, the Revan worship actually started with Knights of the Old Republic 2.
But that's a different company, and Karpyshyn was not even involved in it, so
Well, I mean, in terms of, like, the atmosphere of Revan worship, it did technically start with KOTOR 2, but it was really cemented with this novel.
I dare say Karpyshyn doing it in this novel is worse, because with KOTOR 2, at the very least, that's a sequel to the first game, and at the very least, the events of the first game do transfer into the second game. This book, what is the reason for Revan being so prevalent here? This is like that 2,000 years after. Like, that shit already happened. Like, why is Revan so relevant now?
Not to mention all the other Sith Lords who I think are far more important to the Star Wars universe that I just barely mentioned.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna mention this later again, because originally, I think, according to what I read, is like Jedi vs. Sith was intended to be a tie-in for Dark Forces 2.
Yeah, in a way.
Rusan, Valley of the Jedi, Lord Khan and the Thought Bomb being mentioned in the, those Dark Forces novella.
Yeah.
And then so we started from, Drew Karpyshyn somehow turned a Dark Forces tie-in into a Knights of the Old Republic tie-in. Now, I don't know how that works, but he managed to do it somehow.
Oh, I can tell you how. By cramming in as many references to Revan as humanly fucking possible.
And, oh boy, the next part is probably...
Okay, you know what? To be fair, we've been talking about the Revan Sith Lord stuff. In terms of what else this part does, it is interesting seeing how the Sith Academy works, the atmosphere of that, the fact that the ruins, or at least the ruins of, the Dark Valley?
Valley of the Dark Lords.
Yeah, Valley of the Dark Lords. Not finding anything because it was ransacked by Jedi years ago. There is a lot of interesting stuff here. One of the things I wasn't a particular fan of, which I am certainly saying that a lot in this fucking video, is the shit with Githany. I know it was kind of sort of established in Jedi vs. Sith that there was probably a thing between them, because why else would they kiss? Of course, not entirely, because maybe she just forced herself upon him or something, but at the very least, you could give them a relationship, but I don't know, having Bane have some feelings for her, I just don't think it was necessary.
Oh, by the way, Knights of the Old Republic references aren't over, in case you didn't know. The Sithari is a reference of Knights of the Old Republic, in case anyone
really?
forgot.
I didn't know it was from KOTOR 1. For real?
Oh, yeah. And the Sith Academy in Korriban itself is a giant reference to KOTOR.
Well,
Because I searched, and the Sith Academy in Korriban was never mentioned or appeared prior to the Knights of the Old Republic.
well,
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ, this whole part is one...
Okay, to be fair, I could kind of excuse Sith Academy in Korriban because...
I can let it slide. It's not It's not a direct reference, it's more so just carrying over continuity.
not to mention, why wouldn't the Sith put an academy on Korriban, which is supposed to be their birthplace in the first place?
Then
so.
again, supposedly if this thing is a sequel to the Knights of the Old Republic games, then at the last time we saw the Sith Academy was like the place was like Ribbon and his crew basically killed every single member of the Sith apprentices and the masters inside there, and when we go back there in KOTOR 2, it's like the place is in complete ruin, so nobody's gonna mention how they rebuilt the academy and all that stuff.
Granted, we do see in the prologue that Khan and Copa is discussing that they took over Korriban, so who knows, that probably could have happened days, months, or even weeks before we actually get to Chapter 1, so who knows.
I mean, by the time they get to SWTOR, yeah, the Academy's on Korriban, right? Or is it Malachor?
Malachor was
I think it's
destroyed in
Korriban.
KOTOR 2.
Yeah, it was Korriban. So, but at least by the time we get to 300 years after KOTOR 2, the Sith get it back, and then I guess they lose it again?
Well, I mean, Korriban has always been a planet of importance to both the Sith and even the Jedi, considering how many secrets it has hidden, because, you know, birthplace of the Sith, so, yeah. So, obviously, it's
And
not too much
I think by this time the entire Sith species are all dead, I guess.
They might as well be, yeah. That still doesn't mean that Korriban holds no value for both factions,
Yeah.
so there is that.
The weird thing is this book doesn't even reference the Sith species, like, okay? I mean, some may think the Sith species are not important and all, but this book deals with the whole Sith history and all that stuff, and, you know, you gotta at least mention the Sith species, the original group of people who call themselves the Sith.
Makes you wonder why all of a sudden he's referencing them in the Revan book now. Oh, wait, because the Sith Empire. But anyway,
So, another, a positive is, I think it was Kassim explaining the benefits of using unique lightsaber-esque weapons, you know, a double-bladed lightsaber, energy whip. And in terms of, like, the stuff Bane is taught in these classes, I think is the best part about this section of the book. Because I do find it interesting.
You do like the part, like, Bane, it's still, certain parts are consistent with Bane since, like, he mostly learned from the ancient text instead of Cordis.
The sacred
yeah.
Sith text?
Yeah.
yeah.
And I do like them saying that since the Jedi almost got all this holocrons and all that stuff, and digital recordings, Bane and the apprentices had to actually read what was written in the paper. I think there was like another thing, like some of the records were written in ancient Sith languages, so Bane couldn't read it or something. Wasn't there something like that?
I guess. Well, that was more when he was exploring the Valley of the Dark Lords. That there were some cipherings that he couldn't read them.
Of course, good things couldn't last, and there's another problem/contradiction I found, which is the Sith Lords banning the title Darth.
Yeah, okay, so regarding to that, so Henson, I want to hear your thoughts on this, because I actually have not heard yours.
First, let's explain what exactly is being talked about here.
So basically, according to this book, the Brotherhood of Darkness pretty much banned the usage of the word Darth in the Sith Lord's name title. And basically, no Sith would use, like, say, instead of calling himself Lord Khan, you'd think he would use Darth Khan or something like that. But no, he pretty much banned the word as a means to basically, because to them name, it means superiority or something, that somebody is way stronger than the others, and they wanted to make sure that nobody felt like it was above all the others, which meant that
I wanted everyone to feel equal.
Yeah, and Darth was kind of a word that signified superiority. So
Not to mention, at least according to what Kasim said, another reason was because it quote-unquote painted a target on their backs, because now the Republic and Jedi knew who the leaders were, but of course, Bane calls bullshit on that.
yeah,
Because the book seems to say, like, Darth title is so important and stuff, and I was wondering, because if you read Jedi vs. Sith and Bane of the Sith, no one seems to care about the fact that Bane uses the title Darth. Back in Jedi vs. Sith, there's like a scene where everybody calls Bane Darth, now saying it in the sarcastic way.
Granted, even in this book, by the time they get into Rusan, they still don't question that. So I guess they're
So my thought process is Jedi vs. Sith didn't directly say anything about this, but you can infer from reading it that Sith Lords could use the Darth title, but most of them just chose not to. So when Bane calls himself Darth Bane, nobody really questions it or tries to undermine it. It's just, yeah, that's what he's called. And there's a certain part in the comic that is altered in the novel, but we can get to that in part 3. Yeah. But yeah, my main issue with that is, you read Jedi vs. Sith, it infers something, but then Path of Destruction denies that.
And, like, seriously, like, Exar Kun didn't need to be call himself Darth to show how strong or show that he was the leader, right?
No.
Nagasado and Ludo Crash and Ajuta Poe, they didn't need no Darth titles, right?
No, you see, Dylan, they weren't Revan.
Shit.
Of course.
Because if Revan does it, it must be the greatest fucking thing ever.
But wait, what about Darth Sion, Nihilus, and Traya? They also use Darth.
Excuse me, General, they don't exist.
Oh, yeah, I forgot.
They're not written by Karpyshyn.
Yeah,
And nobody cares about KOTOR 2, General. What are you talking about?
At least in this book, if we get to Revan, no, that's where shit gets heated.
It's like, yeah, that is a good point, though. Like, the Darth title, if you really think about it, doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't.
Like, you have these early Sith Lords who don't use the title, and nobody gives a shit. But this is the really funny thing, though. And now that I've said, but, they aren't Revan, now I know. The only reason he calls himself Darth is because of Revan.
Oh, God.
He really is a simp.
Oh, God.
Granted, there were dudes who used the Darth title. Undeadu use it. Vitiate, although it didn't exist yet, use it. But seriously, you don't need to call yourself Darth something to be a Sith Lord.
Especially since if you're just gonna restart the Sith Order, having a Darth title doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't.
Like, okay, yeah, I guess symbolically it does mean something, but I mean, Bane's goal, gets more into this in the second book, but at least you can get the crumbs of it here. The eventual goal, obviously, is to destroy the Jedi.
That's the Sith Order's goal, yeah.
So, why bother with a Darth title when no one is going to hear it? Like, yeah, you call yourself Darth what's Zana's Darth title again?
Darth Sana.
That's it?
Yeah, it is Darth Sana.
You see, even Zana just used her name.
Yep.
At least calling herself Darth Bane would make more sense, but that's a different story.
When we get to Sidious, that makes sense, because he's starting to come out of the shadows. He's starting to reveal himself to certain individuals. But this early on, there's no fucking point.
there's another thing I'm gonna mention. Did you notice that all of the Siths that use Darth, they don't actually seem to be, well, excluding Revenant, including Sana. Did you notice that all the Sith Lords that use Darth, they don't really actually are using their name, like their actual name. They use like some sort of a word that it's kind of like an adjective of sorts describing them. For example, Darth Sidious, insidious. Darth Plagueis, he's a plague. Darth Tyrannus, he's a tyrant. Darth Vader, an invader. Like, do you notice that? And of course, Darth Bane, well, he's Bane. So.
But there is one Sith Lord who actually broke that rule, according to what I know, and it's Nagasado, because Nagasado, for some godforsaken reason, decided to call himself Darth Nagasado.
Wait, what?
That's such a dumb name.
It is.
Like, Nagasado already sounds like
badass.
good on its own. Adding the Darth just does not sound right.
Yeah, it doesn't.
But of course, my favorite example is Malik, whose original name was just Alec.
Yeah.
Which is so fucking ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
Like, Revan kept his name. No, I guess Alec is a really stupid name, so I guess he wanted to change it for that reason.
The thing, as you read in future year stories, Revan's name was actually based on the Revan chest, and Revan is not the Jedi's quote-unquote real name or something, so we still don't know what Revan's real name is.
I mean,
then again, he decided to go and call himself Revan for being the Dark Lord, so...
Well, I guess there's only one thing we can do. We gotta ask Bane. He would know. He would be the one person who would know Darth Revan's real name.
I mean, technically, if you're thinking about it, when Star Wars came out in 1976, if you read the novel, we didn't know why Darth Vader was called Darth. We assumed it was just Darth, because Obi-Wan was just calling him only a master of evil Darth, so maybe the EU writers of 90s assumed that Darth was Vader's Sith name, birth name.
No idea.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure Lucas already developed the Darth title.
It must.
Maybe not completely, but at least somewhat. Because, I mean, keep in mind, at that point, Vader was referred to as the Dark Lord, as a Dark Lord of the Sith.
Yeah, indeed.
So at the very least, an idea was already there as to what the Darth was.
Mm-hmm. There is that. Not to mention, Lucas was the one that gave the Sith names to Palpatine, Dooku, as was Plagueis. So.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Other Sith Lords with the name Darth Bane, Darth Sidious, Darth Maul didn't exist until 1999, and Tales of the Jedi came out in 1993, so guess that was their assumption?
I mean, who knows? Then again, George Lucas was overseeing the creation of those comics. He probably thought that the likes of Exar Kun and Uli Kaldroma didn't need any Darth in their names, something like that. So same goes with Nagasado and Ludo Crash. So
Darth Nagasado sounds stupid.
Also, keep in mind, Lucas was already writing the scripts for the prequels back in like '94.
That's true.
But yeah. Anyway, so that whole fucking tangent aside. Yeah, so as you our faithful viewers can tell, there's a lot to be said about the contents of this section. And barely any of it was about the actual plot.
Which, mind you, this book does not really have any writing or narrative issues on its own. Like, the book on its own is still pretty good. It's just that when you compare it to other EU sources in terms of continuity, yeah, that's where you're like, what? Like,
yeah, I guess that's the thing. Like, this book is on a technical level well written, but honestly, there isn't a lot to really say about it. Especially since a third of it is just a retelling of a comic.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of its characters come from other sources, primarily Jedi vs. Sith.
Let's see. Let's get that over with. Bane himself was originated from the Phantom Menace novelization, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ordis came from Bane of the Sith. Han came from Dark Forces novella. Anthony and Karpyshyn came from Jedi vs. Sith.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing, like, these characters are not Drew Karpyshyn's character. I don't care if Drew Karpyshyn want to write Revan the way he wants, because it's his character, but when he starts to meddle with the creations that is not his, it's where we start to say, hey, you probably should not do that. Did not create these characters, maybe you should make them act the way they're supposed to do instead of what your interpretations are, right?
Yeah.
His version of Darth Bane would be the type of guy who would write Revan fan fiction.
God. Imagine if somebody actually drew that and posted it online. God. Oh my
And the
god.
sad part is, you can totally buy that could happen with this Bane.
Don't you find it weird that most of the main important players of this book are all not created by Karpyshyn, except for Kasim?
There's that, yeah.
I mean, that's not really a surprise, because, Jedi versus Sith. But, yeah, it is certainly interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't read the Revan novel, and the parts of SWTOR I played, I don't know how much involvement he had with the Jedi Knight storyline.
I can certainly confirm to you, Henson, that Karpyshyn's ego and appreciation for Revan definitely continue in the Revan book. I can confirm you that.
Oh, I can definitely say, just from what I played as SWTOR and what I know about what happens later on, Revan really did become, one of the most important fucking characters in the entire Star Wars universe, which is complete bullshit.
Here's the thing why I excuse Revan novel more than this novel is this. A new Sith Wars era is not Karpyshyn's creation. On the other hand, the Jedi Civil War era, and further on, the SWTOR part is more of a Drew Karpyshyn. So, if he wants to meddle that era, I could partially give him an excuse, but this entire Bane stuff is not his.
A lot of this stuff was already established and didn't contradict each other. Okay, this book, at least I think this was the mindset Karpyshyn was trying to go for. Look at something like Death Star. That novel had a whole bunch of different stories of who created the Death Star, how it was created. It brought it all together and made sense of all these different accounts.
Mm-hmm.
So something like that is justified when you got to make sense of all these different accounts. But here, we don't have that problem. So retconning and changing things for no good reason is just boggles the fucking mind. And we'll get into it when we talk about part 3, but
I think we should get to part 3 now. So
yeah.
Let's get to part 3, guys. So that way we can definitely live it all out. Okay, so part 3. So continuing with this book. Oh, so you guys thought that the Revenant Culture 1 ego stroking of Karpyshyn was reaching its limit? Well, now we get to part 3. And guess what's the planet that Bane went to? Oh,
Rakata Prime.
yeah. Yep.
Oh, shit.
The unknown world from Coder 1. Yep.
And what does he find there?
I'm going for that. Okay, I'm getting there. So Bane lands. He managed to tame a wild rancor and goes to the Temple of the Ancients. Yes, the same temple that you went as Revan. And he explores, goes all the way down underneath in the room with the computer. Yes, the same computer that you interacted with in the game. And the computer doesn't work, but there is a small part in the wall that's like flickering. Like it seems like there's a drawer or something. Bane pulls it off. He finds, oh, surprise, a Sith holocron. Interesting. He opens it up, and the avatar telling the information to Bane. Who is it?
Darth Revan, his senpai.
Yep. And the laughter of Bane in there was interesting. He was like,
Wait. Why didn't the players find this holocron, huh?
That's actually a good question, because if you notice because the avatar in the Darth Revan holocron is his dark side self before he was captured by the Jedi. So yeah, that's actually a good question, though.
Yeah, so when was this holocron created? And why did he hide it here?
Of all places.
Unless someone else hid it, but I don't see why.
And
what was the point?
if you play Knights of the Old Republic, there are a couple of Sith assassins, Sith masters, and Dark Jedis all over the temple, inside the temple. So you mean to tell me none of them find this holocron?
Yeah, that's
And I'll get out of here with that nonsense.
yeah.
Was it ever said that the Jedi came here and like searched for shit?
I mean, it does say in the book that the temple was kind of ransacked, as in there was nothing left. And Bane was like searching that there had to have been something, and he found only the holocron. That was it.
Yeah, I call bullshit on that. There was no fucking way they missed that holocron. Especially if he found it that easily.
Yeah, there's that indeed. So yeah, but anyway, continuing. So Revan gives, yes, Darth Revan gives Darth Bane a long speech on how the dark side works. Most importantly, in regards to the rule of two, which. Yeah, so for you viewers hearing this, yes, this is Bane's biggest idol, giving him the main lesson, the big thing that Bane needed to create the rule of two. Oh, yes.
This part is where I give up. No, I can't go on. Okay, I can, but... Oh, it's
Okay,
not
so-
Revan!
Okay, so when the original idea was that he got the idea from Exar Kun and Baldroma, when exactly did he get that info?
No, it doesn't say it, but the new essential chronology basically says like one master and one apprentice, just like Sarkun and Uli Kaldroma once did.
Because there's a part in Jedi vs. Sith, and I'm spacing on what exactly he said, but Bane is saying how, there should be like one person to be the vessel for the dark side, and Githany says like, or two? And he's like, or two, and she smiles. So like, is the indication there that that's how he gets the idea?
From
At least
Githany?
partially?
It's partially, but supposedly the previous sources before this book were a combination of Exar Kun and Ulikal Droma's actions that happened before, and kind of partially Githany with Jedi vs. Sith comic. So that's
Yeah. Oh my god, I'm having a headache thinking about this. This book, the problem is, Githany suggests Bane and Jedi vs. Sith. Like, instead of having one Sith Lord, how about having two? That scene does not exist in this book.
Yeah, that doesn't exist.
And this just continues the thing that I brought up and that we've been continuously bringing up. The Revan worship in this book is beyond annoying. Like, we have a part here where Bane is just listening intently to every fucking word this Revan hologram is saying. It's like, really, like, this guy, this is the guy you want to learn from? The guy who failed miserably? Who turned back to the light side?
God. Oh yeah, that's right. The guy who saved the Jedi and the Republic is the one you want to look up to.
And of course, like, this was before SWTOR, before all that convoluted storyline happened. But, like, just looking at the first KOTOR, because this book doesn't even care about KOTOR 2, like, Revan, like, yeah, sure, I'm sure there's so much you can learn from this guy, but to think this highly of this guy who failed, I mean, yeah, sure, every Sith Lord has failed, but Revan went back to the light side, and my brain just died. This book just killed my fucking thought process.
Okay, so before any of you to say something, let me finish on part 3 so we can let it all out. So, okay.
Yeah.
So after all the explanation that Revan gave to Bane, Kasim pretty much finds Bane in underneath the temple, and they have a fight, and Bane is at first has the advantage, but then he's overwhelmed because Kasim pretty much now has 2 blades in each hand, and he was pretty much kind of unstoppable, but Bane managed to kill him by bringing down temple down on him and escaping, so there goes that. Then Bane pretty much dispatches a messenger drone to Rusan, informing Khan that Bane killed Kasim and that he he's pretty much going to surrender to the Brotherhood of Darkness, like join them. And also in that message, Bane gave instructions to Khan regarding how to make the thought bomb. So yeah, there is that. And then Bane then arrives to Umbria, and then Khan pretty much sends Ghittoni to pretty much go with him, and they have a discussion, and they kind of embrace each other and kissing each other. But then Bane pretty much realized, oh shit, she had a secret poison in her lips, and yeah, so he pretty much uses the Force to pretty much try to not have the poison kill him. But just as Ghittoni leaves, turns out that there was a second poison in her lips, so Bane pretty much is like near death. He had to kill a few stragglers and feed under fear to pretty much continue to find the planet's healer, or at least one of the healers, Caliph.
Wait. Stop for a second. You're basically reciting Jedi versus Sith? At what point are you basically reciting Jedi versus Sith at this point?
I mean, yeah, it is. Yeah, at this point, we're...
Yeah, I mean, I suppose at this point we can just start talking about all the ways this section fucks up continuity.
Let me just finish it as quickly as possible. So yeah, it happens. He gets healed, gets back to Rusan, tries to pretty much get the Brotherhood of Darkness to do the thought bomb. Thought bomb explodes. Bane survives, finds Sana, and yeah, end of story. Okay, so
that was probably the best summarization you've ever done, General.
This is something that no sources, including this thing, bothers to ask or answer. Is like, how does the thought bomb even exist? Now, the problem I have with this thing is like, it's recorded in ancient texts, right? That this ritual does exist, right?
Yeah, at least according to the book Bane found from one of the ancient texts.
So that would mean someone had to be near to record how this ritual even works and had to survive to pass it on generations and generations. Like, how does this thing work? How did someone even create this thing? And why does it even exist? Like, the thought bomb's existence makes no sense.
I mean, I can buy that somebody could record this and survive. I mean, we see that people can survive if they're at a distance.
Bane.
And I'm sure there's a lot of trial and error in figuring out how the fuck this thing works, but...
And I think Jedi vs. Sith, a Bane of the Sith implies that the thought bomb was something Khan pulled it out of his ass. And Bane thought it was like laughable because in Bane of the Sith, it constantly mentions that whenever the thought bomb is mentioned, it's put on quotations. Meaning that this wasn't something that was actually defined, something existing. It was more of something that Khan came up with.
Yeah, so, okay. So in regards to that, so in this book, compared to Jedi vs. Sith, apparently in Jedi vs. Sith, Bane did not really have any intentions of actually destroying the Brotherhood of Darkness. It's more like he was just seeing them go to their ultimate demise and just...
He was just watching the ship sink.
Yeah.
And there's like an even more horrendous contradiction when Bane talks to the spirit of Cordis and Bane of the Sith. He mentions that he had to escape Rusan to preserve the memory of Brother of Darkness or something like.
Though
No, that doesn't make sense.
Though granted, that's a contradiction more that we'll have to deal with Rule of Two, because that part in Bane of the Sith is...
No, but it doesn't make sense in here also because Bane was intentionally going around destroying the Sith. He also mentions that none of the Sith warlords actually listened to him.
Okay, so since we're at the Jedi vs. Sith part, here's something that I found weird. So Jedi vs. Sith opens with Bane killing this father and his
It's the
sons.
villagers that he used to pretty much feed under fear to pretty much be able to sustain himself before the poison killed him to reach Caliph.
Yeah. So, and then later on we find out that, he's poisoned. And then also later on we find out that it was Ghittoni who kissed him and he let her do it like 3 fucking times. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, in the comic, we're never told where they kissed. It could have been on another planet, and he traveled to this planet to find this healer, specifically. But in the novel, he decides to go to this planet that just so happens to have this amazing healer on it. Like, now don't get me wrong, I know Star Wars is all about conveniences. I mean, just look at the Lucas saga. But this is a weird one where it didn't have to be written like this. Like,
So
I don't know, like,
okay, so I'm gonna explain the. Yeah, I was asking that when I was reading this, but then I read the small passage in the book that says that pretty much the reason why Bane chose to go to this planet before it got poisoned is because it's like 1 parsec away from Rusan, and it was pretty much a good meeting point to meet the envoy of the Brotherhood of Darkness.
well, yeah, I know there is an explanation, but I just think it's really convenient to have this be the planet that also has the healer and where we get the Jedi versus Sith opening.
Yeah.
Oh,
And then, of
wait.
course, we have this really bizarre thing of in the book, or in the comic, it acts as though Bane is, well, not only well known within the Brotherhood, but Khan has a personal relationship with him. Like, they know each other. But in the book, they don't. And nothing outright contradicts that. Like, it's never directly said that. Oh yeah, no, they definitely, like, had beef. They'd met before. But it's weird. And add in the various amounts of contradictions. Like, certain interactions in the comic just do not happen in the book.
Yeah.
You know, Bane talking to Githany and her giving him kind of the idea for the Rule of Two does not happen. They do have that conversation, kind of, at least the start of it, where they talk about how, oh yeah, you tried to poison me, but they don't bring up the whole Rule of Two thing. And also, later on, when Githany's death is completely different. In the comic, she has Dervit with her, which is a character from Jedi vs. Sith. They go to the place where the thought bomb is meant to go off, and before the ritual even begins, she and Dervit leave. But in the book, Dervit just does not exist.
No.
She doesn't leave the ritual until after it started and dies within the cave. But in the comic, she still feels the effects of the thought bomb, but is still able to make it to Bane before finally turning to dust.
Yeah. I do have to mention in regards to missing characters, not only is Derobit completely missing from this book, he literally appears in the second one, but also another character called Buck, which was another one of the young younglings that was accompanying Derobit and Rain.
Okay, remind me, Githany's old Jedi lover.
Oh,
Was he in this book?
No. Here's the thing. He was mentioned in the book, but the scene where she kills him is completely removed. So, like,
It makes you
I'm
wonder,
trying-
why even bring him up to begin with?
Yeah. So here's the thing I've been wondering is like, why do you constantly reference Jedi versus Sith or trying to explain the things and how things happen in Jedi vs. Sith, while at the same time contradicting Jedi vs. Sith? You either completely override it, so you create your own version, or don't. Why do I have to see Drew Karpyshyn's interpretation of Jedi vs. Sith, and also read Jedi vs. Sith to understand things that are not explained in its trilogy? Either do it or do not. There is no try.
It really is this weird case of Path of Destruction is clearly trying to be the definitive version of events for the Battle of Rusan. But in order to understand a lot of things, like who the hell Arden, Derevit, and Zana are, you have to read Jedi vs. Sith because, and this is one of those weird things. Karpyshyn decides just to cram the entire Jedi vs. Sith comic into the epilogue. And when I say the entire comic, I mean the Derevit, Harden, and Zana stuff. He just crams that entire fucking story into the epilogue, which is only like a few pages. And so, after reading this book, following Bane and some of the other characters, we're just suddenly introduced to this new girl who had this entire fucking storyline off screen. Like, why the hell should I care that this girl killed these two Jedi? And it doesn't have any of the I mean, it does kind of have the context, but we don't see her with Law. We don't have them having that relationship, so her killing these guys doesn't mean jack or shit.
Guys, I gotta ask something quickly. So, does in the Path of Destruction say that Gittany was the one that killed her lover?
No, I think it was more like Gittany and Charlie were fighting, and then Gittany basically orders Darabit to kill him.
But there's no Darabit mentioned here in the
That's
book.
the problem. Darabit does not. I think Darabit is indirectly mentioned as Xana's cousins.
Yeah, he is.
But seriously, I mean, this book doesn't even entirely adapt Jedi vs. Sith comic at all. So, which means we also have to, if you're living in 2006, you have to either read this book, then read Jedi vs. Sith, or if you're living in 2007, it means you have to read the parts that drew up to and ignore the parts that contradict Bane Trilogy. Like,
The book carries over some of the dialogue, but changes every other piece of dialogue. It rearranges some events.
Yeah.
And that's not the only thing I have a problem with, according to this section. Because if you read Jedi vs. Sith, someone says, like, Lord Khan has brought us to this glorious battle, and Bane asks this Sith, like, Khan calls himself a lord? Which brings up the Darth title, the emphasis on the Darth title this book tries to have in question again, because that would mean that Khan didn't call himself Darth until Jedi vs. Sith, and that would also mean Bane met Khan before Battle of Busan. So this entire book...
At least heard of him. And Khan not using the Lord title yet, but
That means Khan either called himself Skier Khan or Dark Khan or something.
And also another thing regarding that little conversation, in Jedi vs. Sith, that nameless Sith Lord refers to Bane as Darth Bane, but in the novel he refers to him as Lord Bane.
I think that was changed because it will go against Drew Karpyshyn's vision of Darth Bane.
I mean, yeah, that's the internal... That's all about internal consistency. But again, it's just another continuity problem. But also another thing, too, that bothers me, so... Oh, wait, did I already bring up Farfalla?
Nope.
Nope.
Okay, so... I guess I could have brought the... actually, I think he shows up... Anyway, so, in the comic, Farfalla is... I don't know what his species is called, but...
No. He's like a human Bothan hybrid or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's an alien.
Yeah.
And he has, I'll just say goat legs, basically, and a tail.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Path of Destruction, it visually describes what he looks like, but leaves out his lower half. So for this entire book, he's basically just a human.
But there's one good thing about this thing that this thing did. By ignoring the design of the Fairwind.
Oh, God.
Remember Fairwind?
Oh, God. The Treasure Planet ship. Oh, God.
Except when we get to Rule of 2 and it basically confirms that that's how the ship kind of sort of looks like.
So, it makes me wonder why Drew Karpyshyn said it doesn't look like that. It describes as a gunship in this book, and then goes and changes his mind in Rule of 2.
Yeah, I think it's even described as a classic design or something like that.
I mean, it makes you wonder, does it?
Also, another thing, Farfalla's messenger in the book was whatever the Star Wars equivalent of a harpy is, but in here, her physical appearance is never just described, so she's basically a human.
And this is the biggest problem when it comes to aesthetics. I have is, or it's described as the Jedi and the Republic and the Sith are fighting using modern weapons. Laser blasters. While Jedi vs. Sith has people actually using spears, axes, swords, and, blades and stuff. Then you see people all using blasters and like, why are you using modern day weapons here?
There could have been a good explanation. I think you had one in mind, Owen, when we talked.
Yeah, I think what I said was like, explanation Drew Karpyshyn could have used is like, reason why these people are using less advanced weapons are they're running out of resources, so they had to rely on ancient weapons. Or another good example would be the Jedi Republic and the Sith soldiers are using melee weapons because they're made out of cortosis, so they could fight against lightsabers. Drew, couldn't you have think about those kind of explanations instead of having everyone firing lasers?
Yeah, creative ways to pretty much deal with that, but no, Karpyshyn decided to change all of that. So there's that indeed.
Something else I want to bring up is rereading Path of Destruction for this podcast brought something to my mind that I never realized before. Revan is proto-Ahsoka. He is Ahsoka before Ahsoka was a thing. What do I mean by that? Okay, so obviously not as egregious as Ahsoka is, especially when it comes to the new canon of being the most important fucking character in the entire universe. But Revan started off as a simple blip in the timeline. He's important, but not, like, more important than any other character. He just exists. But then, the more we get about him, the more that's written about him, the more I'll just say Karpyshyn is kind of his creator, the more his creator gets to work with him, the more his importance, like, grows to, like, a laughable degree, to the point where suddenly the entire universe revolves around him, and he is just the most important fucking thing to happen to Star Wars since 1976. And, you know, that's why we get all the Revan worship, Bane being a fucking simp for him, everything involving SWTOR. It's like, no. Revan, I don't think he ever was, like, that great of a character. Good enough, but people overblow his fucking greatness. But this is just annoying, and it was really cemented in this book. It started in KOTOR 2 with how Kreia talks about Revan, but this is a book that really cemented the fact that Revan, oh yeah, greatest thing to happen to Star Wars ever.
And also his creator having a big ego on him.
Yes, if I have to hear Revan's name said one more fucking time, I'm gonna take my copy of the KOTOR video game and slam it against the wall.
Although I don't think Drew Karpyshyn is as protective of Revan as Timothy Zahn is protective of Mara J. That I could know that.
I mean, I guess there is.
I mean, I would say because he wasn't the sole creator of Revan, he just worked heavily on that character.
But he does treat him like his creation. So.
Yeah, I mean, Revan and KOTOR might be Drew Karpyshyn's greatest accomplishment. Just like I said, KOTOR is considered the greatest video games to some. It's considered the greatest Star Wars video game to most Star Wars fans, isn't it, right?
Yeah, especially outside of Star Wars fan bases, yes.
And I think this somehow affected Drew Karpyshyn's ego.
You could say that, yeah.
Well, you know, it's like this book and the next two books in this trilogy do a better job at this, but Rule of Two is also affected by this to a lesser extent. But like this book could have been honestly one of the greatest EU books ever. I know people already consider it one of the best, but it doesn't focus on the areas it should. Like, here we have a chance of taking all these various sources that talk about Darth Bane and just putting them all together in a narrative. And because nothing really contradicts each other, this should be an easy fucking task. Just write a straightforward narrative and boom. And not have the constant Revan worship. Have Bane go through all these other Sith lords, what their ideologies were, what their accomplishments were, what their faults were, their victories, their losses, and just how this guy created the Rule of Two, but we don't really get that.
I mean, the suggestion I talked about a lot is like this. So, Bane, my suggestion to how this book should have ended is like this. Bane got poisoned, and it ends something like Stop Rusan, where Bane will finally, the Jedi and the Sith are fighting, and it will show the final fate of the galaxy or something. The book should have ended before starting Jedi vs. Sith.
That would have been one way to do it.
And you could say in some kind of a Star Wars insider say something like, if you want to read more and continue the adventures of Darth Bane, read Jedi vs. Sith.
Yeah, that would have been a good way to do it.
But better yet, do what Darth Plagueis did, and not fuck up continuity.
I mean, Darth Plagueis did something right, because James Lucino did explain the events of Cloak of Deception, Darth Maul Shadowhunter, and was it Saboteur, and Jedi Council's X in War. He didn't go into them so long, but he condensed them short enough that people understood what it was. And it didn't contradict what was previously established.
Yeah, it is funny that he was able to talk about Orca Deception, the Darth Maul novel, the short story, the Darth Maul miniseries, the Jedi Council comics. Like, he was able to talk about these like full-blown stories within a full-blown story and have it all make sense and not have it feel convoluted. But Karpyshyn, working with one miniseries, one short story, and a few other sources that I don't know, unless we have like other short stories that I'm not thinking about. But the point is, there was very little to work with, and so there was little chance to fuck it all up. And not only did he fuck it up, he did so deliberately, which is worse.
No, the thing I'm wondering is, how do you cause a... I mean, it's not more of a continuity error anymore because this thing already, replaced those stories. But how do you cause so much contradiction at the time to the point like using only one miniseries and a short story? Is that even possible to cause this much continuity errors in this scale with these two short stories?
And of course, well, obviously there's that. Yeah, there's that. And of course, it makes you wonder, why didn't the Star Wars EU fan base react negatively to it, to this book? Well, there was some backlash, but it didn't get to the same level as the Revan book. And I think I got an explanation as to why. Why in the Revan book there was big backlash, when here not so much. And it's because in the Revan book it was pretty much retconning parts of Coders 1 and 2, or at least not even bothering to mention them. And in here, it's with EU sources that some or a good chunk of people, especially the casual people, would deem as either obscure or outdated.
No, here's the thing though. It kind of relates to that point. More people have played the KOTOR games than they have read Jedi vs. Sith, especially Jedi vs. Sith, which, let's be real, is a more obscure piece of EU content. Not like that obscure, but it's easy to miss.
Yeah, it is.
And more people, I'm sure, read the Darth Bane novel, I should say the Darth Bane Trilogy, because it's a Darth Bane Trilogy. I mean, the creation of the Rule of Two. Of course you would fucking read that trilogy. But Jedi vs. Sith, you look at it and you wonder, like, well, what the fuck is this about?
Yeah.
I think the more reason is like the Knights of the Old Republic games are these super popular things. And as we all know, KOTOR 2 fans are kind of crazy, right?
It's not just them. Knights of the Old Republic 1 is probably, at least before the Battlefront EA games.
Let's say KOTOR duology fans are kind of in there, right?
What I'm gonna say is that Knights of the Old Republic 1 is considered is arguably the most popular Star Wars game, not just in Star Wars circles, but outside of Star Wars itself. I mean, just look at the BioWare.
Yeah,
that's
the other thing too. The KOTOR games are even popular with people who wouldn't really consider themselves big Star Wars fans.
So this is more of a hypocrisy thing. Drew Karpyshyn, hypocrisy for the fans of Drew Karpyshyn's work, because KOTOR games were so popular, like a little continuity error would cause people so much anger and rage, but these Darth Bane story, there weren't that much Darth Bane fans prior to the Darth Bane Trilogy, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So
that's because most people don't read.
Right. So there is that. It makes you wonder why wasn't James Luceno available to make the Darth Bane trilogy? I think he should have probably been one to tackle it, at least in one book.
I mean, I would love to see what his version of the Bane trilogy would look like.
I think I know why Drew Karpyshyn was decided to be the writer up at the Destruction. Just look at the novel of the Old Republic. It's a huge already red flag to begin with. And Drew Karpyshyn was the man who wrote the story, or was head of the story, head writer of the great Knights of the Old Republic. I think they're trying to get sales out of it by having Drew Karpyshyn's name attached.
Now, I do wonder if a novel of the Old Republic was meant to be the start of a new subline that just didn't really go anywhere.
The novel of the Old Republic thing doesn't even make sense because Rule of Two abandons the title. For some reason, Dynasty of Evil uses it again, despite being set in 990 BBY, which is like 10 years after Old Republic, so it makes you wonder, does it?
I mean, if you're going off the episode 4 thing of, yeah, we're just going to consider everything pre-Empire or Imperial rule of the Old Republic, then maybe, but I don't know. I just find it weird that these novels are like, unless I'm missing a short story or something, these are like the only sources that actually have that tagline.
A novel of the Old Republic?
Yeah.
Yeah, at least without SWTOR, yeah, they pretty much have it.
Wait, no, that's just called Star Wars The Old Republic, Revan, Annihilation, Fatal Lines. It doesn't say...
none of those use the tagline.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That, excluding the SWTOR ones, yeah, the Path Destruction and the other two, they just use that tagline of a novel of the Old Republic.
And you know what's weird? Knight Errant series doesn't even have that.
Huh. Well, I guess that's something.
Yeah.
So, I think I kind of got an answer as to why Karpyshyn was put into writing Darth Bane Trilogy instead of Luceno. And so, according to Karpyshyn, apparently Knights of the Republic 1 let him get his foot in the door with LucasArts, which eventually led to his career as a Star Wars novelist. So it seems that the success of KOTOR kind of catch the eye of Lucasfilm and told them, hey, you want to write some Star Wars books? Well, there you go. So that seems to be the case. So,
I still wonder if it was the best choice for a video game writer to be in charge of the Great Sith Lord for the prequels. Yeah.
Well, I mean, a video game writer isn't the problem. It's the fact that they chose a writer, or maybe he was the one who pitched the idea and they allowed him to do it. A writer who was very boastful about one character. I will say this, though. Something I miss from Jedi vs. Sith is Bane's pure white eyes.
I think that was more of a...
I'm sure it was a stylistic choice, but
was, yes.
Still, that's a visual I really liked and wish stuck.
That's just a stylistic style. Obviously, when we get like guides and pictures, we will obviously see him in a more realistic image.
I just remember two more contradictions with this book. One is Bane of the Sith short story says like Bane abandoned Cordis, and it doesn't mention anything about Bane killing Cordis, but in Path of Destruction, Bane kills Cordis.
Yeah, so one thing to mention is that...
Well, actually, no, he doesn't. He leaves him on the brink of death. No. Because he still gives Farfalla, he tells Farfalla what the fuck's happening.
That's Karpyshyn.
That's Karpyshyn. Karpyshyn died at the hands of Bane. Bane strangled him to death.
They have so little personality, I mixed the two up.
So, yeah, anyway. So, yeah, so in Bane of the Sith, there is no mention as to how Cordis died, or even when he died, or how. So in a sense, Karpyshyn could have put his death here, but obviously Bane himself doing it kind of does raise a small question as to why that's not mentioned in Bane of the Sith. So, There's
Did
that.
I mention about Bane trying to preserve the memory of Brotherhood? Bane
Yeah, you
said-
did.
You did.
It makes you wonder why Karpyshyn changed the story so Bane was the one who intentionally caused the destruction of Brother of Darkness.
I
That
mean,
part is a huge contradiction for me.
it's a huge
You know-
contradiction if you bring in Jedi vs. Sith into accounts, but if you read the book on its own, it makes sense as to why Bane would do it. Like, it's not.
We're
really-
not talking about the book on its own.
I know that's what I'm saying. That if we put it aside with Jedi vs. Sith, then yeah, that is a problem. So
And if you read Jedi vs. Sith, the reason why Bane wants to create the rule of two is not because the Brother of Sith Darkness is like a parody of the Sith. It's because he think having too much Dark Lords was the problem itself. So the dark side is like dispersed or something. What was he saying?
dark side was pretty much spread across and not
Yeah.
really
It was
focused on
spread
one
too
part of it.
thin.
Yeah.
Spread too thin. But in the novel, it seems to contradict that idea, and Bane seems to think the Brother of Darkness is like this sick joke or the dark side version of Jedi.
Which
Unfit to be Dark Lords of the Sith.
yeah.
You know, honestly, rereading Jedi vs. Sith, one thing that became very apparent was the fact that what Jedi vs. Sith sets up as the backstory of the comic is, in my opinion, far more interesting than Path of Destruction. Like, having Bane already being this well-known figure that has had run-ins with Khan, they know each other, so much so that Khan would that it was Khan's idea to poison Bane and not Githany.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, that I think is far more interesting than
And, you know,
Bane not knowing who Khan is.
and Path of Destruction entirely removes the concept of child soldiers during war, which was a very interesting topic that was used in Jedi vs. Sith. Like, it shows how children during war could suffer. This idea or the themes of Jedi vs. Sith is completely ignored because
Well, it was brought up early on, if I remember correctly, but then nothing was actually done with it.
Oh yeah.
because Darabit, Zana, and Hardin, okay, Zana appears,
At
but
very
the other two are completely removed.
They are completely removed. Yeah. So
Yeah, so you know, we do see that what's happening on Ruusan is hell, but not really doing anything with the child soldier angle, which showed how desperate they were.
mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't show like the full scope of just how bad Ruusan is.
Yeah. You know, this book wouldn't have been much of a problem. It had worked in tandem with Jedi vs. Sith instead of retconning it. Like, as the one said, the book could have ended before the events of the Battle of Ruusan. Or another idea, just focus entirely on the perspective of Darth Bane without actually changing dialogue or anything, and just keep it just strictly on Bane instead of having to go back to Lord Hoth and Farfalla and Khan at one point in their struggle with the Battle of Ruusan. Like, if the novel had focused purely on Darth Bane himself, on purely his own perspective, I think it would have excused more itself as for telling those events, rather than instead a few times changing perspectives with the characters, and obviously, of course, retconning the events of that
And
battle.
speaking of Khan's characterization is something I really didn't like, because Khan is described as this fool, according to Bane, who doesn't understand the dark side and all. But you gotta remember, Khan was the one who reunited all those little Sith factions who were fighting for 900 something years. It was Khan who reunited all those factions. Yet Bane just considered him as some kind of an idiot. Like, no, I can't take this book seriously anymore.
Granted, it's because he united all the factions, but rather than have them be subservient to him, he's sharing power with them. So that's why Khan is a fool, for sharing power instead of just having everyone pretty much be subservient to him and him leading them to ruling over them. So that's the real reason why Bane considers him a fool. So
On a related note, I'm not a particular fan of the thought bomb being Bane's idea that he subtly fed
Oh yeah.
to Khan. Like,
Yeah,
I get it within the context of Path of Destruction, but I much prefer the original idea of Brotherhood's destruction just being because of their own undoing. Like, Bane having, like, really nothing to do with it.
I mean, Bane of the Sith actually mentions, like, Bane is like, hey, Khan, you idiot, you'll kill all the Brotherhood if you use the thought bomb. Maybe you should not use that. And Khan is like, I'm not listening to you, Bane. That's what it basically happened in the original version.
Yeah, I think that idea is far more interesting, that Bane pretty much knew that the Brotherhood would essentially tear each other apart, so he just sat back and watched it play out. But no, in Path of Destruction, he, like, actively, like, puts pieces in place that lead to their Path of Destruction. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Which, I mean, like I said, it does make sense in the context of the story, and it does show Bane's ingenuity and just how intelligent he is. But, like I said, I think one's more interesting than the other.
Yeah. So for you viewers to understand what we're saying, it's like, so most of our issues with this book, they stem on the fact that we're pretty much comparing it heavily to Jedi vs. Sith and the Bane of the Sith story, and it's pretty much because those were the first sources that established Bane's backstory before he became Darth Bane and before he made the rule of two. So yeah, the note we're leaving here is that the book by itself is good, but when you compare it to the previous sources, then we get problems. So that's the main takeaway from our thoughts here. So
Because, people, continuity is important, especially when you're writing a story specifically meant to take place within a pre-established universe, and to have a story just not give two shits about contradicting other things is a problem. The EU strides itself on being consistent across the board, so to have this display of bullshit is, well, unforgivable.
yeah.
It just baffles me how you destroy continuity so much with only 6-issue miniseries and one short story.
The one credit I can give this book is that it could have been worse. We could have gotten a TCW situation, which destroyed an entire fucking era.
Oh,
This book just destroys, really, one miniseries and a short story that are self-contained. Honestly, I'm not saying it's good, but it could have been a lot worse.
It technically messes up the whole Rusan Reformation era, doesn't it?
Well,
I mean, it's relatively self-contained compared to something like TCW and the Clone Wars era.
not to mention the TCW, it's the entirety of that changing the continuity affected other parts of the EU timeline.
And let me mention you this. Bane of the Sith was Kevin J. Anderson's last contribution to the Star Wars Expanded Universe.
The last?
The last.
Oh.
This was his final story to the Expanded Universe, and someone like, Drew Karpyshyn coming and just overwriting the stuff, contradicting, and doing his own interpretation, I think that's a little scummy.
Also having no good reason on doing so.
Yeah.
Because like I said, if this was a Death Star situation and you had seemingly contradictory accounts, then yeah, bring it together, make things seamless, and boom, good to go. That wasn't the case here. Now, like I said, overall, there isn't much to really say about this book because most of the characters are taken directly from another story, and a third of this story is just, a rewrite of a miniseries. Yeah. So, on its own, not a lot to say. But, in terms of the original stuff that's here, it's good. Especially part 1. And some of the bits of part 2 that are not dealing with something for Revan. Would I recommend this book overall? Yes. But if you are a fan of continuity and are a stickler for it, Prepare to be in for a world of pain.
Yeah, because what I would recommend is never. So this is how the process for me works. Either read only 3 Path of Destruction main stories, or read only Path of Destruction and Rule 2, Bane Trilogy. You can't try to do both things, because in the back of your mind you'll constantly say, your brain will tell you, hey, this is not supposed to happen, or hey, wasn't this supposed to happen later, or was this character supposed to be in this place but not. Yeah, that's why I'm recommending to only read one version.
Yeah, there is that indeed. So, yeah. Anything else to say, guys?
This book annoyed me more than the last time I read it, so there's that.
Similar boat. Reading the first time, obviously, as I said, I noticed the contradictions between it and Jedi vs. Sith, but reading it for this time, the Revan worship became far more apparent and annoying. This book just confounds me. I have no idea why Karpyshyn wrote it the way he did, and it only makes sense with what we see him do in the future. I would recommend reading Jedi vs. Sith before reading this, because although this book contradicts the fuck out of it, you still need to read it in order to understand certain plot points.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so there is that. No, there is one unfortunate thing regarding to this book. After the release of this book and the other two, they're pretty much considered the canon version of what happened to Darth Bane's life and the events of the Battle of Rusan. So yeah, Jedi vs. Sith and to some extent Bane vs. Sith were retcons. So yeah, just letting that there.
Here's the thing though. Especially, in regards to Rule of 2, because that's where we get, Bane of the Sith retold, while you should read Jedi vs. Sith, because there is stuff you need to know that isn't really redone in the Bane trilogy, Bane of the Sith, you can just completely ignore and miss absolutely nothing.
Yeah, that's even worse, because Drew Karpyshyn completely managed to erase, well, figuratively, erase Bane of the Sith from existence.
Yeah, so yep, there is that indeed.
Don't think of that what you will. Kevin J. Anderson's final bit of Star Wars content was just completely erased.
Poor Kevin J. Anderson. So yeah, now let's get into the final part of this podcast, and well, before the conclusion, that is, and it's, well, of course, the expanded universe connections, which okay, so
I'll go first.
Yeah, go.
This is really pushing it, but Jedi vs. Sith, Bane of the Sith is an obvious reference,
Obviously.
while contradicting it at the same time.
Oh god.
God.
We cannot forget KOTOR,
Of course we
Oh.
can't.
the most important Star Wars story ever told.
Oh god.
And I think Tales of the Jedi, Sith War.
Obviously, Sarkun, yeah.
Sarkun, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Nagasado mentioned, so that's basically Tales Jedi Golden Age of the Sith. So there's that indeed. Now,
Oh, no. Dark Forces 2, because technically it's taking a Rusan in the belly of the Jedi and all that shit.
oh yeah, definitely. Same goes Brotherhood of Darkness. They also are from. They're actually from the novella Dark Forces Jedi Knights. So technically, that is also a reference here.
And I think new essential chronology, due to the fact that Revan's called a he.
Yeah, he was made male in the Essential Chronology. So there's that. But anyway, that's not really a reference. So in regards to other references, well, Apparently there's a few planets from across the the expanded universe that actually make their mention here. For example, Gentes was mentioned here, and that's from Young Jedi Knights, Jedi Bounty. Honor was mentioned, and of course we know that's from the Tron trilogy. So there's that. We already mentioned Ruson. Ryloth is one that was mentioned, I believe, as early as the Star Wars source book. So there's that too, and then there's the thought bomb itself. It's also from Dark Forces Jedi Knights. So there's
Novella.
Yeah, the novella. And some of the stuff that this book introduced, like the TC-22 blaster rifles, they first appear here. They actually also appear in Star Wars Galaxies and Empire Divided in an update. So
Let's not forget the Phantom Menace novelization.
oh, of course, Darth Bane. There's that too. What else? Well, there's also the planet Apatros, which gets later mentioned in Darth Plagueis, and then there's the specific members of the Brotherhood of Darkness also being mentioned in future sources. Some of those future sources are obviously Jedi vs. Sith, the Essential Guide to the Force, because that's the 7th guide, and of course we're going to reference this book. Complete Star Wars Encyclopedia, Book of the Sith, Secrets from the Dark Side, the Essential Reader's Companion. So those definitely are also... There's a few Star Wars fact files. This probably are more references to Jedi vs. Sith, but can't really tell. So, yeah, Kopis and Gitoni were mentioned in Star Wars fact files. So there's that. Though those fact files were in 2003, so they're referencing Jedi vs. Sith. So I'm not giving you that one about destruction. So there's that. The specific species that the first student that Bane killed in the duel ring, the Makurv, they first appear here, but they actually were first pictured in Star Wars Chronicles. So yeah, like that specific species was first pictured, but it didn't seem to have like a. And they were also first mentioned in Star Wars customizable card game. So there you go. Then of course, it seems that the Battle of Rusan is mentioned in the Essential Guide to Warfare, at least some characters like Kyo Charney and Valentine Farfalla, and of course Rusan itself mentioned in Essential Atlas. Yeah, there's several references here. So as much as we don't like what Path of Destruction did with some of your sources, it does at least connect to plenty parts of the expanded universe. So at least we do give it credit on that. So
I'm just saying, not on a plot line.
yeah, obviously not.
You know, it's just planets and I guess certain concepts, but in terms of plots, it fucked up greatly.
Yeah, obviously. So there is that. But yeah, that seems to be all of the sources that I can think of. You guys got any more?
No.
Oh.
Okay, well now we go to the conclusion. So who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
This book made me realize how much of a contradiction and fundamentally broken Darth Bane's story was. And, it will get better in the other two books, especially Dynasty of Evil. But, like I said previously, this book annoyed me more than the last time I read it. And it was, the more I read this book, the more I notice contradiction, which, as a result, lessens my enjoyment every time I read it. There's that.
Okay. Henson?
Well, I suppose there is only one thing I can say after all is said and done. Is anyone up for writing Bane X Revan fanfiction?
Oh, God. Well, that's something. There's that. Anyway.
I will leave it at that. My thoughts have been made clear. Let's get that fanfiction!
Right. Anyway, so Henson, yeah, for real, your conclusion thoughts.
Well, as I've said before, on a technical level, book is well written, but since most of this book acts as a retelling of another story, I can't really judge it too much as its own original piece. And in terms of it being a retelling, it brought up a lot of contradictions that make no fucking sense, are irreconcilable. And the constant worshipping of Darth Revan, who I can now say is the greatest fucking Star Wars character ever, and Bane wants that sexy Mandalorian mask. I certainly would.
Oh god.
And so, this book did a lot to piss me off. It's... I can't call it the worst EU book I've read. Well, actually, maybe I could. I haven't read any book that really pissed me off, except for this one. Not to mention all the continuity problems. So, for now, I can probably say this is my least favorite EU novel.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, so as for me, well, so my thoughts on this book, well, when I first read it, I definitely had a great time. I enjoyed it. It was awesome. But rereading it now, yeah, I definitely did get less enjoyment out of it compared to my first time.
Well, I guess you can say the spark is out.
Yeah, you could say that. So, yeah, and yeah, my second reading through it was, let's just say, not really that wasn't the most I was still hooked, but let's just say that the book definitely, its contradictions slash retcons, they definitely were starting to be more noticeable than before. The many mentions of Revan definitely were like, all right, yeah, I get it. That's enough. Seriously, I mean, I do like Revan's character, but I think this is stretching it, like, seriously. So yeah, and coming up from reading the Revan book, yeah, definitely, yeah. Definitely found more annoying. So there is that, and yeah, we'll see how the next book goes. I hope it definitely gets better than this one, because this one is definitely half retelling of previous EU source, half original. The half original parts are definitely the more interesting compared to retelling. So there is that, and yeah, so that is pretty much my thoughts. I mean, kind of enjoyed it, but nowhere near as much the first time I read it. So there is that. And well, with that, we finish this book. And of course, next to your podcast, it will be Darth Bane Rule of Two, of course. So yep. So we'll see you guys on the next State of Star Wars video. Bye bye.
Bye.
Yeah.